In the D&D community, many people disagree about the use of homebrew. Not whether or not we use it, but how we use it. And I think that is a very important thing to tackle. Now, homebrew changes everything about your game. Sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. But this is how homebrew has the potential to save your game. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is perhaps the most powerful and inspiring game in the TTRPG genre. It is by far the best known one, and in many cases has gone through so many updates and changes and has had so many optional rules put into it that there's so much flexibility with it too. And it is able to achieve all this by placing a larger emphasis on roleplay and making your character's choices matter much more than they did in previous editions. Unfortunately, this is not always reflected in the combat presented in the base game. While the story of a campaign or module may depict a group of unlikely heroes clawing their way tooth and nail to victory, the reality of combat in Wizard of the Coast Epic is more like battles between overpowered superheroes and meek grunts. These characters are often so incredibly strong that only the greatest demons, archdevils, and gods could ever hope to oppose them. Combat isn't the only thing that can take away from the story you're playing, though. The world can do that too. Games like Dungeons & Dragons are so often portrayed as escapist fantasies, where the worries and problems that fill our real world can't affect us. But what if the game you are playing does feature these things? In Dungeons & Dragons modules even, uncomfortable realities can crop up out of nowhere, such as the racist acts and ideas that are commonly depicted as hatred between the elves and dwarves, and feature retribution for damages done centuries ago. This is a very sore subject for a lot of people and can cause a lot of discomfort. And what if none of the published modules even interest you? This is where homebrew comes in. Combat in Dungeons & Dragons is unbalanced for several reasons. The first issue is the action economy, which is the number of actions that the players have per round compared to that of their enemies. Now that's a little wordy, but more or less what that means is that if the players each have one action and there are 4 players, and the enemy has 2 attacks, then they have double the action economy that they do when compared, because in a round they're able to make X number of attacks, and then the players are able to make 2x that. It's a very simple way to break it down, but generally that is one of the reasons combat in D&D is so broken. The reason for this, though, is that the action economy is generally unbalanced, as a lot of creatures who had access to traits aids in previous editions that let them make more than one attack in combat, such as multi-attack being the most common one, have lost it in 5th edition. While characters such as fighters and monks gain an increased number of attacks with action surge and flurry of blows respectively, it is undeniable that the visual appeal of such a monstrous single opponent fighting your party of 4 to 7 players, the usual amount, is enticing, but this spectacle rarely lasts beyond the first round of combat, as there are typically far more characters than the creature has actions. If you want to make a situation deadly, increase the number of creatures, or increase the number of attacks that creature can make. Those are very standard or simplified ways to just increase your ability to present interesting combat encounters. And in fact, this is true in most cases, unless you were to present a near unkillable monster to your players, like dropping an ancient red dragon on a group of level 5 adventurers, for example. While you can absolutely do this, though I wouldn't recommend it, and I don't see why that would be advantageous for you, it shows that the line between a boring fight and an impossible one is shockingly narrow. And this is rather simple to resolve with Homebrew. Simply by tweaking monsters to grant them additional abilities, as I said, such as multi-attack, spellcasting, or a secondary phase, which is a very video gamey trait, but it is surprisingly lacking in base 5e. Personally, I expected far more of it when I first started playing. However, we can use these to increase the difficulty of combat encounters without necessarily breaking them. This is not the only way to use Homebrew to create more balanced or interesting combat encounters. Another is actually by creating entirely new monsters. Wizards of the Coast provide an exceptional guide to assist in this endeavour in the Dungeon Master's Guide on pages 273 to 282. But looking at these pages just presents us with another issue that Homebrew will be able to help us with: the use of challenge rating. In Dungeons & Dragons, challenge rating, or how it's usually referred to, CR, is a system for dungeon masters to estimate the relative challenge a monster presents to their party. Now, this is usually done by assigning a number that relates to the expected power of a group of 4 characters at that level. Now, that might sound a little bit complicated, but what this means is that a single CR3 monster, such as an owlbear, is expected to provide a medium difficulty battle against a group of 4 level 3 adventurers. However, the CR of a base 5e monster, typically those that can be found in the monster manual, rarely match the guide given by WotC to ADMs who wish to rank their own bespoke creatures. In fact, they're usually woefully underpowered. But thanks to Homebrew, this can be remedied in one of 2 ways. By either reviewing the DMG's guide to monster creation and increasing the creature stats respectively to match its CR, or vice versa. Although I rarely recommend this one, and I believe the other one is a far better method. You can also decrease the challenge rating to match the creature stats. Creating new creatures of varied CRs can be great to fill out monstrous hordes that you present to your players, especially if they're used to expand on a new world brimming with possibilities. D&D is a big game. You have many different modules, many of which actually take place on different realms or in different countries or places, meaning that your characters could inhabit any range of worlds. For example, Eberron, which is a fantasy realm of technological marvels and a pseudo-caste system where members of the aristocracy are marked to distinguish them from the rest of the population. There's also the Swords Coast, which is part of the magical land of Faerun. It embodies typical Tolkien-esque fantasy with all its usual trappings. But this doesn't have to be the case. You don't have to use any of these worlds, modules, or campaign books. While they are all great for informing DMs on how to structure their game or their world, they aren't confined to that specific world. Creating your own world could result in something as magical or as gritty as you choose. And Homebrew can be used to enhance this, mechanically speaking, rather than allowing the narrative to purely drive the experience. Though injury tables and the rules around them may be a tad controversial, they can provide the much needed stakes and gritty realism that you personally may be looking for. The creation of magical hotspots can be used in high magic settings, things where random and bizarre wild magic effects can change anything and everything with ease. Alternatively, you could do something more similar to Eberron, where you introduce more technological marvels. Being an artificer is more about infusing those items with magic rather than being focused more so on the creation of those items themselves. These are all very good possibilities and just ideas that may help you formulate the type of world you want to present your players with. Homebrew simply is a very, very powerful way to embellish your world with new ways to experience and play this game that we all love so very, very much. In fact, Homebrew is powerful in the way that you can do anything to your world, either to fix some of the issues with D&D 5e or to add more depth and breadth to your world, changing everything from the world itself to the people who live in it, be it by class or race. From the mechanics of combat to the creation of new items and spells. In this way, Homebrew really does change everything. Alright, thank you so much for joining me today. I know this was a little bit different of a format, a little different bit of an approach. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do like and subscribe if you did enjoy. And leave a comment down below on what you thought about this. If there is anything that you think specifically I left out that really would have been a great point to make about why Homebrew is the amazing thing that it is. And anyone who knows me knows I love Homebrew. I love making my own world. I may as well make my own game, but Dungeons & Dragons is such a good base. So thank you so much for joining me again. And like I said, leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. If that's everything then, guys, have a good one. Bye-bye.